everybody. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome to It Takes Two, a podcast where two people take two movies with the same plot or premise and watch and discuss them.
And welcome back to another Christmas episode.
Yeah. And
this week we watched Scrooged and A Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yes, so two adaptations of Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol.
Yeah. It's been a very heavy Bill Murray week for us because we've just watched a whole bunch of Wes Anderson movies.
Yeah. It turns out Nick had never seen a Wes Anderson movie before, so we've done a little bit of a binge of Wes Anderson movies. Yeah. Unfortunately, we probably won't cover any of those on the podcast because as much as we love them, they're
completely unrelated to any other movie.
Yeah, they're all very unique, so they're not gonna show up on our list at any point, I don't think.
So the main differences between these two movies is obviously Scrooged is set in a modern era, and then the Muppet Christmas Carol has Muppets in it, and is set time accurate to the sort of era where it was written.
And yet, the one with the Muppets is the more serious of the two movies.
Yeah, which is bizarre to me.
It's a great movie, though.
You say so. Well, we'll compare our notes to see my opinions about it.
We might. This might be the end of the podcast now.
It's not going to be the end of the podcast. So, as I always like to go with the beginnings of the two movies, in Scrooged it starts off with a James Bond-esque assault on Santa's workshop, and then the $6 Million Man himself rescues Santa with a minigun. Just amazing. Yeah. And the Muppet Christmas Carol starts as a slow pan over a European style village.
They both start out with aerial shots they start out in the clouds coming down into which I thought was interesting. But obviously in Muppet Christmas Carol everything's very bright and it's, clearly, this is London in the 17th century or whatever it's supposed to be, and it's all snowy, whatever. Whereas the other one, it's coming down over the North Pole, and it's also very snowy, but it's very artificial, which I guess is the goal of it. You've got Santa and his elves and things, but it's you then find out it's a TV commercial and being shown to our main character Bill Murray, who is a TV executive, or he's the president of the network.
Yeah, he's the president of the network.
Frank something, I've forgotten his last
name.
name.
Francis Cross?
Oh yes, Francis Xavier Cross.
Yeah, that's right, Xavier. Where did I get Francis from?
Frank is probably short for Francis Xavier Cross.
Just his partner calls him Lumpy, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
So yes, the opening of Scrooged, other than when the $6 Million Man saves Santa, is everything I hate about Christmas.
Right, it's the commercialization
It's the
of Christmas.
commercialization, yeah. And where versus in the Muppet Christmas Carol, it's the fourth wall break. Yeah.
Because in the Muppet Christmas Carol, we are led to believe that the great Gonzo is Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
So for the purposes of this movie, he's Charles Dickens. So there is a point later on where he gets knocked out and Rizzo goes, Gonzo, I mean... Mr. Dickens, Charlie. So for all intents and purposes, Gonzo is Charles Dickens for the duration of that movie, and he is our narrator.
Yeah.
I think the commercialization of Christmas was a good angle to go with for a Christmas Carol movie.
Yeah.
Because obviously the purpose of A Christmas Carol is it's all about a person who is a moneylender who is, stealing from the poor and, making people homeless, evicting them on Christmas. So it is all about that, power hungry, money hungry attitude. Yeah. And a president of a TV network that's trying to capitalize on Christmas is the perfect, person to go through that same story.
The next big differences that I noticed was the dialogue in Scrooged is way more adult, even though it's like a Christmas movie. My favourite part is just that whole, when they're going through who's going to be in... Because in Scrooge, the premise is they're running a live show...
A live broadcast of the story of A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
Which they never refer to by name in the movie, because it's Scrooge. They call it Scrooge, and they say, based on Charles Dickens' Scrooge. It's like, hang on, Charles Dickens didn't write a book called Scrooge.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called A Christmas Carol.
there's two pieces of dialogue in that first sequence that cracked me up. One was, "Children love an acrobat."
Yeah.
And the second, "Now I have to kill you all."
yeah.
Oh, sorry. "Now I have to kill all of you."
Yeah. When he doesn't like their
his pitch.
Yeah.
Because their pitch is sort of like, here's a bunch of like clips from the show.
Yeah.
Like, please, join us for this special time of Christmas.
Yeah. Whereas his idea is you've got to scare your audience. You've got to make them think that they can't possibly miss this.
Yeah. So for an audience of families getting together, he's got like guns on the street, drive-bys on the motorway, and people mainlining drugs.
Yeah.
And in the Muppet Christmas Carol, I was given a whole bunch of singing from both the movie and yourself.
True. Yes. I mean, it's hard. Well, in my defense...
Is it your defense?
I started to sing the first song honestly, before we started watching it, I kept singing the music from the opening.
Yes.
But when the first song came on, I started singing along with it, and then I said to you, "Oh, sorry, I'll stop singing," and you said, "Well, it's already on my notes." So I thought that was a blank check for me to continue singing for the entire rest of the movie.
Yeah, it was just the fact that I was going to bring it up. So yes, Bill Murray is the main protagonist in Scrooged, where you get a younger, but he's still old, Michael Caine in Muppet Christmas Carol, who plays... There's only two real main human characters. Him and his nephew, yeah. Because even the Murphy brothers... Murphy?
What?
What did I say?
You said Murphy.
Murphy. No, it's
the Marley brothers.
Marley. Thank you.
Yeah, well, because in that's one thing about. Well, I mean, it's irrelevant because there's no Marley in Scrooge because he has his old boss instead. Yeah. But in A Christmas Carol, it's Jacob Marley as his business partner. But in A Muppet Christmas Carol, they added another brother so that they could have Statler and Waldorf, and they called him Robert Marley. Yeah. So his name is Bob Marley.
Yeah.
So you've got Jacob Marley, the traditional character, and then you've got his brother Bob Marley.
Those two were almost my favourite Muppets.
Yeah, Statler and Waldorf. I mean, I think that's who we are a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Moving back through, there's some interesting pieces of like randomness that stood out to me in Scrooge that just make the movie feel more, I don't know, real. It's not real, but it's just the characters seem real.
Yeah, there's a lot of ad-libbing in Scrooge.
Yeah.
There's a lot of improvisation. I didn't take down the exact quote, but when I was researching it, the director made a comparison with what directing Bill Murray is like. I've forgotten exactly what he said, but it was basically about how you can't. He will he will go and do his own stuff, and you just gotta hope that you get something out of it.
Going through what I mean by that is just in more detail. His boss comes down from the top floor and throws him this pitch that clearly shows that he's insane, where he is obviously paid for research to go through and watch what's happening, and he's declaring to Cross that more cats and dogs are watching TV, so therefore they have to start focusing on that audience by adding more animals into their production.
Yep. Do you want to know a fun fact about that?
What?
Those channels now exist. This is a note that was added to the trivia in 2015. It said, Preston tells Frank that in America there are 27 million cats, 48 million dogs, and then quite seriously says that IBC needs to start gearing programming towards them. As of 2015, there are several dog and cat specific channels on Roku that supply dedicated pet programming based on scientific studies of what interests them. That is legitimate information.
But the whole point of the reason you use targeted programming is to sell targeted ads.
Yeah.
How do you sell ads to a cat or a dog?
I guess toys, maybe cat toys and or dog toys.
But that's still appealing to the human that's also watching.
Yeah, but the human has got to, the cat's got to be annoying the human trying to play with the toy on the TV to the point that the human goes and buys it. Because I mean, cat food and things. There's definitely huge pet food companies that would pay for advertising on those slots, but obviously the pet isn't going to know one food from another by looking at an ad.
Yeah, it's not like children when you advertise cereal to them.
Yeah.
The other thing that stood out to me is the fact that Cross drinks Tab and vodka.
Right.
I've never had Tab because I don't think that's because this is 88, I think the movie's set in.
Yeah, somewhere around there. I can check when it was made, 88, yep.
Yeah. I'd never had Tab, so I have no idea how that would taste.
Okay.
Because there's a sequence when he has his first visit with the Harbinger of Doom, which is his old boss.
Right. Yeah.
He just drinks like a massive, basically 90% vodka with like splashes of Tab, which most of it gets on the countertop.
Okay.
It stands out to me as just being a bizarre combination of like alcohol.
Okay.
But yeah, just wanted to point that out, that it was Tab and vodka.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
What does Ebenezer Scrooge drink in Muppet Christmas Carol?
I don't think you ever see him drinking. The thing that I didn't note down as a note about his consumption of food was after he gets home after the end of his work day.
Yeah.
Which the comparison between Cross and Scrooge is the man who's begging for his mortgage is one of his executive team, which he just fires.
Right, yeah. Bobcat Goldthwait, who was amazing in that movie. I love Bobcat Goldthwait in that movie. He's so good. It's Elliot something, Land something. Yeah. I don't remember exactly. Elliot is his name, though.
He is eating bread and cheese, which was a pretty staple meal before the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
So that was actually it was either well researched or is mentioned in the book, because I've never read
everything in the Muppet Christmas Carol is very well researched, because one of the other things that I have in my notes is it's one of the only, so I think I've read the book but it's been a long time, but they kind of hint at Tiny Tim being sick but don't give any specifics, and most adaptations of the book have Tiny Tim just using a crutch, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's their only indication there's something wrong with him. This is apparently one of the only adaptations of the novel where they actually show how sick he is, and what they have is they have him coughing a lot and getting weaker and coughing into a handkerchief and things like that. And it's indicative of either whooping cough or pneumonia, which were both common ailments at the time that it's set.
Yeah.
So they obviously went, what could Tiny Tim have had at that time that would have killed him, and looked into it, which is really interesting, because they obviously were trying to be very period specific.
Both the characters are huge pricks, which I've got down here as a note. He is a huge prick.
Yeah.
But they're pricks in a different way.
Yeah.
Scrooge is, from Muppet Christmas Carol, is very money focused, family doesn't exist, and you see that when he goes with the 1900-year-old child back to his childhood where he's at school, and he's like, hey, there's my best friend, and then it's him alone in his classroom. The principal's like, kill everything in your life, love whatever, business is the thing you focus on, and then you'll be a real
and
man.
it's even that when they're showing him at the youngest that they show him, and the person who's his best friend, or just the two kids come up to him and they're like, hey, you're gonna miss the train, and the other kid's like, no, he never goes home.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have anyone to go home to, or he doesn't ever go home. So what we see is that his Christmases every year are him alone in the school while the whole rest of the class has gone home to their parents.
It's interesting because in that sequence where you see the young Scrooge, Ebenezer, sitting there at his desk and everybody else just leaving.
Yeah.
the way that the senior version of himself is justifying that is kind of twisted, because he's like, oh yeah, this was the best thing, like this is the great, like,
yeah,
and you're just like, that's seriously messed up, because even as an adult he doesn't understand that was doing serious trauma to him.
Yeah.
Cross, on the other hand, his dad was a butcher.
Yeah.
And his mum was still smoking, with pregnant with his younger brother. And, you know, gets handed like 5 pounds of veal as a Christmas present.
Yeah. And then, but he does the same thing. He justifies it like,
because that's like $50 worth of meat.
Yeah, because him as a kid, he's really upset that this is what his dad has given him. But him as an adult, he's like, oh, you know, that was this much, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and he's saying what a great thing it was that he was getting veal as a Christmas present.
On Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
So the love interest in Scrooged, which is Claire, who's like this hippie chick, sort of like the kind of...
She's not really a hippie. She's just cares about people.
She gives him the Kama Sutra
and
is smoking marijuana in the bathtub. That is, for the 80s, that's a hippie.
Okay. But I mean, when you meet her in modern times, that's when you go back to the past.
Yeah.
When you meet her in modern times, she's just a nice person who's volunteering at a homeless shelter and, you know, trying to, you know, get people in need the help they need at Christmas. She just seems like a really nice person.
Yeah. I really liked, in Scrooged, the choices they made for the 3 ghosts.
Yeah.
You get the ghost taxi driver who literally drives them back in time.
Yeah, which is a Back to the Future reference.
Yeah. So his was his old boss who, that scene... Okay, I'm just going to jump backwards a little bit. The scene where he holds him outside the window. So he pushes him through the window, but the window doesn't break. And he's stuck outside just gripping onto this like rotted zombie forearm.
Yeah, and then he
starts shredding through it with his fingernails, and just his arm snaps off, and none of it, like, that's why I love practical VFX, because it looks fantastic now.
Yes.
Versus CGI, which...
Yeah, so the him going through the window looks a little bit dated.
Yeah.
But not a whole lot dated, because it's a very simple effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, the practical effects of the zombie boss, and that's an interesting thing that obviously in Muppet Christmas Carol, when you've got the Marleys, they're just as they normally are, but totally white and covered in chains. Now that's a great effect though, because they have them ghostly, so they've obviously filmed them and green screened them, but lower the transparency of it. But then they have the real chains as well, so Scrooge is getting caught up in chains that are actually physically there. But they're just, you know, as they are, but white. Whereas in Scrooge, it's his boss, his old boss who has died, and he's like falling to pieces, zombie, like coming back.
The mouse with the golf ball.
He's because I guess the implication is that he died on the golf course.
Yeah, because he said he was at the height of his life, surrounded by women and fame and wealth, and was doing a putt, and then was he was just dead. Yeah, so the implication is that he was hitting the head with a golf ball. Yeah, so hard that it was embedded in his skull. Yeah, so he shows up in full like golfing outfit with his golfing bag and stuff, and then when he's doing something and you look at the back of his head, a mouse pushes the golf ball. I just love the scene where he just pulls out like a ivory handled 5-shot little revolver and just unloads on him, and Bill Murray's screaming the entire time while he's shooting him, but not like a screaming like fear. Yeah. It's screaming like like trying to make himself feel more manly. Yeah. And he's just unloading at this guy, and the guy is just making himself a drink. Yeah. Just totally wash Bacardi. Yeah. He's like, you can shoot me, just, you know. Yeah. It's expensive alcohol. So yes, the Ghosts of Christmas Past is the cab driver. I felt like it was Benicio del Toro, but I'm wrong. Oh no, absolutely not. I don't know. But it's just he had that sort of crazy. Like, there's a whole TV trope of cab driver who's not what they seem. They do it in Ghostbusters as well, which is another Bill Murray movie where they get in that Slimer, I think, is the driver. That's like a whole trope of, taxi driver who's not what they seem. So he gets into the cab and it's this nutjob guy who drives him back in time. But he's the Ghost of Christmas Past, and it's funny because then he shows him like he's got the
the license, the taxi license, and it just says "Goes to Christmas Past," which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, so he uses the car to travel back in time, a la DeLorean. Whereas in Muppet Christmas Carol,
it's a 1900-year-old child.
She's so creepy. That's another practical effect done really well, because what they did is she is a Muppet, but they filmed her underwater and then superimposed her onto the live action shot. So she is that's what she looked like, but that's why you get that weird floaty thing. It's not CGI. That is just cloth and water floating around. So it's a really interesting effect. But once Scrooge touches her hand, they can fly. They fly towards this light, and he's like, that can't be Dawn, and then suddenly they're in his childhood.
Yeah. And then obviously he touches on his love of his life, which was obviously some sweet woman, and he's just like, no, money comes first. And she's just like, I don't care. Yeah,
it's interesting because it's Belle is her name, which actually in Scrooged, the taxi company is Bell Taxis, which is a reference to that. So she, obviously they meet at a party and then fall in love or, whatever, and then it cuts to, and she says there's another Christmas with this woman, and he's like, don't show me that, please don't show me that. And then it cuts to them, it's basically them splitting up, and it's because they've been planning, they've been planning their wedding, isn't it?
Yeah, they've been engaged for a year, and she's just like,
they're engaged, they've been planning their wedding, but he's like, no, I need more money, I need whatever, I need the business to improve, and she's like, well, you said that last year, and he's like, yeah, and the business continues to be bad.
Yeah.
And then we have our lovely scene that is cut from the movie. Yeah. So annoys me.
Do you want to touch on that now?
Yeah, I might as well. So I made Nick watch this because we have it on Disney Plus.
Made me watch it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but I said to you, let's watch this. It's removed from it. So basically, they removed it from the movie because audiences found it too sad. So it was in the version that I grew up with, but for later VHS releases and for the DVD release, and now for Disney Plus, they cut this scene from it. So the version that you see is them having this conversation, then she stands up and walks away, and that's the end, and everyone's crying.
Yeah.
But in the original, and as they have it as a removed scene on Disney Plus, when she gets up, she sings a whole song and then leaves. And then that's why they're crying, is because of the song. And it's really sad, because the Scrooge of the time is like just trying to walk up to her, and then he kind of gives up and walks away. But at the moment, so the song is called When Love Is Gone, I believe. So it's her singing about how, so he's saying like, we'll do it next year, we'll do it next year, we'll do it next year. And then she said, no, the love is gone.
Yeah.
This is it. There is no more love here, basically. And at the moment then, when he kind of just walks off, Michael Caine as modern Scrooge, older Scrooge, walks in behind her and does a duet with her about, it was almost love, it was almost always, and all these things that it could have been. And then he just starts weeping, and it's so sad. It's just so sad. What did you think of it? Because that was the first time you'd seen that scene.
Yeah, it sets the tone obviously a lot heavier.
Yeah.
But as a Muppet movie, I can understand why because we like to sugarcoat everything these days, and that's why mainly I don't watch kids' movies.
Yeah,
movies that are aimed at a younger audience.
They really don't sugarcoat things in Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah, but that's the thing. If you put that scene back in, the movie is 100% better. Yeah. Because it is way more heavier, it's way more punchy, it's way more
and they are apparently going to put it back in, because they've found, Brian Henson has announced that he's found the original negatives, and they're going to reinstate it back in the movie. So that's fantastic. I had hoped that would be the case by now, but it hasn't happened. But genuinely, apparently, most people consider Muppet Christmas Carol to be the darkest and most upsetting movie adaptation of A Christmas Carol.
And therefore the best.
But it's because of that song, it's because of them showing Tiny Tim being really sick, because of the song Bless Us One and All, which Tiny Tim sings. And then the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is so creepy, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But there's even a moment in it where Rizzo turns to Gonzo and is like, what about the children in the audience? He's like, it's culture. Yeah. It's good. Yeah, so in both movies they meet their love interest at Christmas.
Yep.
Related to a Christmas party. So in Muppet Christmas Carol and also in the book of A Christmas Carol, Scrooge meets Belle at Fozziwig, or I think in the book his name is actually Fizzywig, so it's funny that they just went, well, it's close to Fozzie, let's put Fozzie in that role. Who is his old boss. They meet at a Christmas party at his old workplace. And then fall in love from there. Whereas in Scrooged, he's also at a party that his old boss is doing. So his old boss in Scrooge is playing the role of both Marley and of this Fizzywig. I think it's Fizzywig in the book. I should have double checked that before we started recording. That's fine. Okay. And then it's when he's on his way home or when he's leaving because he decides he doesn't want to stay there.
Bumps into Claire, who's coming out of a stop and smacks him in the face, and then that's why
so she opens the door of a shop and hits him in the forehead.
Yeah, that's why he gets the nickname Lumpy.
Lumpy, yeah.
Claire as a character, because you get a lot more about her than you do with Belle.
Yeah.
Is such a better person than he is.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know why she got back with him in the end.
Yeah. There is a note I put at the end of the Scrooge thing that I will talk about eventually.
Okay.
Near the end of this. The Ghost of Christmas Past, cab driver versus a child.
Yeah.
Ghost of Christmas Present is a fairy who just beats the shit out of him.
She's so good. Apparently she actually, that moment where she pulls his lip down, she actually tore his lip and they had to stop filming for 3 days while it healed.
Makes sense. She just goes to town on him and shows him his brother, who's having like a nice family get together, which he was invited to.
Yeah.
And Grace, who I haven't talked about yet. Grace is his assistant, a woman of colour.
Yeah.
A single mother of multiple kids.
Yeah.
And there's a sequence, I don't think it was there, or it might have been in that sequence or later on, where it's talking about. Oh no, he does. He asks why her son doesn't talk.
Yes. Yeah, so at the beginning of the movie we get a moment with Grace where she says that she's not working or she's leaving early because she has to get her son to the hospital or to a doctor. And he's like, no, if I'm working late, you're working late. And she's like, but I booked the appointment months in advance. So you kind of go, okay, there's something up here that her son needs a doctor's appointment that's booked months in advance.
Yeah, he's the tiny terminology.
And she's Bob Cratchit.
Yeah. Grace's husband was killed, and it was in front of the boy, and that's why he doesn't speak.
Yeah.
Which is a severely dark tone for a Christmas movie, but then, we just had the scene before that, which I hadn't mentioned, but I will mention now, which was Christmas Nipples.
The Christmas Nipples.
And that's all I'm going to say about that. Then when he comes back to reality from his trip from present, he's underground with. I don't remember who the character was. Was some of the homeless person he met when he went to
so that's... is that not when he finishes being the present? Or Christmas...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is Christmas Present. Sorry, where he sees Tiny Tim. Well, not... I've got his name written down, I should say. I was like... I thought I could remember.
Grace's son, whose name is, as you quickly scroll
Calvin. Yeah, because his name is Calvin Cooley. Yeah. Because he's named after Calvin Coolidge, who was known as the man of few words.
Yeah.
So when he finishes his trip through the Ghost Christmas Present, he wakes up in a sewer, and a homeless man that he saw earlier on that had asked him for $2, and he said, no, there's a sucker in there, go talk to her, basically. He finds him frozen to death in the sewer.
Yeah.
Which is also very dark. Obviously that role in Muppet Christmas Carol is Bean Bunny, who doesn't freeze to death, thankfully, but you do see him in the newspapers, shivering and I think I don't think they could have gotten away with getting a Muppet to freeze to death in the movie. It would have been a little bit more upsetting.
So he escapes from the sewer and then he's just instantly back on their set where they're rehearsing.
Yeah.
But going back to sort of in the Muppet Christmas Carol, everything sort of happens in the hours of darkness, so there's no switch back.
Yeah. Whereas in Scrooge, it's happening at noon rather than.
Yeah.
So in Muppet Christmas Carol, it's 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And in Scrooged, it's noon. I guess must be 1 p.m. and 2 p.m.
Maybe. It's the time, it's hard to tell when it's sort of New York, because it's always brightly lit and he keeps going from place. The scene where he starts hallucinating right before he gets visited by the first ghost is hilarious.
Yeah, where he's in the restaurant with his
boss and the assistant that his boss is hiring for him.
Yeah, so the boss hasn't told him yet that he's hired the assistant, but you first meet that guy because that guy he comes out of the elevator to talk to him. He's like, oh, we met you at this thing. He's like, I'm going to go talk to the big man because he's friends with my dad or something, and that's when Bill Murray starts to go, uh-oh, they're going to replace me. So then they're in a restaurant together, and he hallucinates an eyeball in his drink, and the waiter...
You're on fire.
The waiter is so good, though, the waiter that's looking after him, because he's just, like, accepts it as, like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir, I'll take that away, and then he's like, he's pointing at the other waiter who he's seeing is on fire, and he's like, no, sir, that's a baked Alaska. It's a dessert. You wouldn't want that. I mean, he's being so kind to him. Like, I would have tipped that waiter so much. Just what a good guy.
The sequence after that for Scrooge gets a bit squirrely, so I'm going to move back to...
we haven't talked about... So we've talked about Ghost of Christmas Past in both movies, and Ghost of Christmas Present in Scrooged, but not in Christmas Carol.
That's where I was going. He's again it's showing the fact that the family Cratchit is full of love and happiness, even though their son's really sick.
But I mean, can we talk about that ghost for a minute first, though? Because I think
the
he's
giant.
So well done.
Yeah.
He's a little absent-minded spirit.
Yeah.
No, he's a large absent-minded spirit.
Yeah.
But no, the fact that they keep him as he only exists on Christmas Day and then he's gone, and it's like because he's the ghost of Christmas Present, he's always in the present, so he keeps repeating himself and forgetting what he's just said and forgetting what he's just done. So when he introduces himself first, he introduced himself like 3 times. And then when they go to Bob Cratchit's house, he's like, that's Bob Cratchit's house. And then Scrooge's like, that's Bob Cratchit's house? And he goes, is it? How do you know that? And the other thing they do is every time you see him, they add more grey hairs to his beard and hair.
Yeah, he's getting older.
So throughout the whole sequence, he's just getting older and older, and then he's like, that's it. I only live for 1 day.
Yeah.
I had 2,000, brothers and sisters before me.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, but it's also, he's introduced as this really lovely character that you love and you want to get along with, and Scrooge starts to get along with him, and then he's like, well, now I'm dying, and Scrooge is like, no. But the stuff he shows them is similar stuff. It's it's the Cratchits and
his nephew, and basically everyone enjoying themselves despite his negativity.
Yeah.
And it's not really hatred; it's just dismissal, really. He doesn't care about anything other than himself and money.
Yeah.
Which is basically what these stories are about, showing someone who has the ability. This is my take anyway. Some other people might feel differently, but it's showing someone who has the ability to change a lot for a lot of people.
Yes.
And that's why they get a redemption, because most people who are bad guys shouldn't get a redemption.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get a James Bond movie with a Bond villain at the end. It's like, oh no, I've changed my mind.
I do think Ebenezer Scrooge seems more worthy of a redemption than Frank Cross.
Yeah, because he's still a prick.
Because I think Ebenezer Scrooge is just very focused on one thing, whereas Frank Cross is actively being cruel to people.
Yeah.
Like, the way he treats those homeless people is horrible. But then again, Scrooge throws, he throws a wreath at Bean Bunny, and he throws Bunsen, Honeydew, and Beaker out of the place when they try to ask for a charity donation. When he's talking about evicting people on Christmas.
Yeah. You can gift wrap them if you like.
Gift wrap the eviction notices. Yeah, so I mean, there is a level of cruelty there, but I feel like Frank Cross is more actively wanting to be cruel, whereas Scrooge it's like a side effect of him being focused on money and thinking, well, he's got that mindset of, well, if they want to not be poor, they can just work to not be poor, which is not how the world works.
And it also shows what happens to you if you just focus on that, because he's literally a horrible old man with nobody.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you're not the biggest fan of all the songs, But the songs are great in Muppet Christmas Carol just for introducing characters, because obviously Scrooge, the opening song, it tells you about his character. It's how everyone else views him as, you know, Mr. Skinflint and all this, and, you know, all the things that are wrong with him and how he doesn't care for anybody and whatever. You know, you get a really good picture of what he's like as a person and how others view him from this opening song.
Yeah. And
then when you get One More Sleep Till Christmas, that's your proper introduction to Bob Cratchit, because you've been kind of introduced to him before then as, you know, an assistant to Scrooge, but that song is where you see his optimism and his kind-heartedness, and, you know, there's no such thing as strangers when a stranger says hello, that kind of stuff. Like, it's just really good introductions to the characters through song.
The one thing I will take away from the second song of the movie was the skating penguins is a rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down. But penguins don't exist in the Northern Hemisphere.
No.
So we're just going to move on from that, because I was thinking about that for way too long. And so
they were singing fruit. They're singing fruit in that movie, and
there's
your
fruit
worry
in
is...
Europe. There's no penguins in Europe. I'm sorry. Sorry, kids at home. No penguins in the Northern Hemisphere.
There are in zoos.
Okay. Anyway, yes, the sort of Ghost of Christmas Past are both sort of portrayed by a Reaper-esque character.
Future. Ghost of Christmas Future.
What did I say?
Past.
Yeah, future. Sorry.
Yeah, so in Muppet Christmas Carol, he's the Ghost of Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come.
Yeah.
And then the other one, he's Ghost of Christmas Future. Though it's interesting how he shows up in Scrooge, because in Scrooge, Frank meets the Ghost of Christmas Future, as in the person dressed up as that for the show first in an elevator, and he's like, wah, and then they're like, stop scaring Frank, get out of here.
Yeah.
But then when the show is on, and he's up in his office, and he's got like 9 screens or 12 screens, something behind him, they're all individually showing the show, and then this ghost starts to come across all of them, and it's so good. But then he's like reaching out for him, and then he's interrupted because Bobcat Goldthwait shows up with a shotgun.
I love that whole sequence with him.
It's so good.
Because he just goes to town on him with a double-barrel shotgun. And it's just that scene where he's like crawling, trying to hide in a glass table, and he just pops around the corner when they both each reach the end of it at the same time, and you just see a close-up of Bobcat's face with the shotgun barrel pointed straight at the camera, and he's just like, hello, rabbit, and you're like, yes!
He's so good, because we do get the whole way through it, we get a subplot of what his character is going through, what Elliot is going through. So obviously he gets fired at the beginning. His wife leaves him. He becomes homeless because he's kicked out of his house. He starts drinking, and there's there's a scene where he's like drinking alcohol in the street, and a car splashes water up in his face, and then the bag rips and the bottle falls on the ground, and it's, you know, and it's just really upsetting. So he just starts, within 24 hours of being fired, he just has this total mental breakdown because his whole life is gone. Yeah. Everything has been taken away from him by Scrooge, by Frank.
Yeah.
Which is why he then just shows up with a shotgun in his office, and it's fantastic.
So yeah, so it's the same sort of flashbacks for both characters. Well, flash forwards for both the characters. The only difference is that Tiny Tim dies versus
Calvin is institutionalized.
Yeah. Both ends up in his death, and so basically it's only his nephew
slash brother. Yeah. So Frank's brother takes the place of Scrooge's nephew.
Yeah. The sequence where Frank is in the coffin and is pushed into the incinerator, and you go from the outside to the inside.
Yeah, it's so good. He's like trying to grab the coffin as it's going in. He's like, don't burn me, and then he wakes up in the coffin, burning alive.
Yeah.
And like just screaming at them, and they're obviously, have no idea because they can't see or hear him as the ghost version, but it's quite brutal that he's being burned alive in that coffin.
Yeah, that is a great fear.
Yeah, and then he wakes up again in the elevator. So he had, to go into the future, he had fallen into the elevator as he was trying to get away from Bobcat Goldthwait, and then he wakes up coming out of the elevator again, and then he's like totally crazed and like, yay, everything's great, and Bobcat Goldthwait's character is terrified. But then he kind of uses him as his assistant, as Scrooge does with Bean Bunny in Muppet Christmas Carol. He gets him to go buy the turkey and etc.
And said he holds up the production crew inside the control room and makes him, while he runs onto set, to basically have a crazy moment, which is the singing and dancing and the through the streets that Ebenezer Scrooge has in Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And said he does it live on TV and they're trying to fire him. It's just that sequence where it's just like, no, it's all the guy's idea.
Yeah.
And then Claire comes back, and then they have like this big singing moment. And
and Calvin gets his Tiny Tim moment where he walks up to him and because he's like, did I forget anything? And he's like, oh yeah, no, he pulls on his leg and he's like, oh, did I forget something, big guy? And he goes, God bless us, everyone. And it's the only thing that kid says in the movie, and then everyone's amazed that the kid has spoken.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a Tiny Tim line anyway. But it's interesting, one of the interesting things I found about Scrooged is obviously it's all set along the same time as this live broadcast.
Yeah.
So they keep having things happen at the same time. Like, you know, I think he comes out of he appears in the set at the same time that the Ghost of Christmas Past has just finished or whatever, and there's, you know, sequences where you get Calvin sitting watching Tiny Tim scenes on the thing, and when he falls out of the elevator, it's Scrooge opening the window in the TV show, you know. So there's a lot of parallels that they really want you to make by having it happen in their live broadcast at the same time it's happening to him.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I think they're both thoroughly enjoyable movies.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge Muppet fan.
Shocking.
Yeah.
I wonder if either of us are a huge Muppet fan.
I wonder who could sing every single song off by heart.
Yeah.
And
that's legitimately why I have Disney Plus. I got it so that I could watch the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Okay, seems inexpensive.
Well, I got it so I got the 7-day trial to watch Muppet Christmas Carol.
7 times?
No, just a 7-day trial, and then my parents that year for Christmas were like, oh, well, if you really want Disney Plus, we'll give you a year of Disney Plus. That was their Christmas present that year for me.
Yeah.
And then the following year I was like, yeah, I'll just renew the subscription. But I mean, at that point, there was all the Marvel stuff and the Mandalorian and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But initially I signed up for a 7-day free trial so that I could watch the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Fair.
Because I love that movie. I think I was thinking about it as we were watching it. I think it's legitimately one of my favourite movies of all time. I just don't think about it when I'm thinking about favourite movies because it is, you know, a seasonal movie. It's a Christmas movie. I don't tend to watch it outside of the season.
Yeah.
I say don't tend. I have done.
Yeah.
But mostly I watch it around Christmas and then don't watch it again for the rest of the year. But it doesn't feel like Christmas to me if I don't watch the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Did we watch it last Christmas?
I think we did, yeah.
Because I made you watch Die Hard.
Yeah, that was it. You got me to watch Die Hard and I got you to watch Muppet Christmas Carol. Yeah. I mean, I do like Die Hard though.
Yeah, it's a superior Christmas movie.
But that was our trade-off.
Yeah.
And I think we watched both the Home Alone movies as well.
Yeah, we did, which is thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Muppet Christmas Carol is, I don't know, it's a particularly special movie to me. And I think it's largely made as good as it is because they keep it so serious.
Yeah.
Like Michael Caine said, you know, when he said he'd do it, I discovered when researching this that he literally like tracked him down and was like, I want to be in this movie. But one of the things he said was, I will not be having a laugh, I will not be going like wink wink and doing Muppety things. He said I will be acting
playing
in this
character.
Yeah, I will be acting in this as if I'm acting for the Royal Shakespeare Company.
Yeah.
And they said perfect.
Yeah.
And it is perfect. Yeah. I mean, the fact that he takes it so seriously is part of what makes that movie great.
Yeah.
But the whole adaptation is serious. Like the Muppets are all played seriously. You know?
As you can. As
you
Muppets.
Get Rizzo is your main comic relief. Yeah. And what's interesting about that is so Gonzo is played pretty seriously, but because Rizzo is the comic relief, Gonzo gets a little bit of comic moments as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of slapstick humour in there.
Yeah, but when you get to the part with the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, they say, this part's too scary for us, so we're going to leave you on your own. Yeah. And it means that they are removing the comedy from it. They're very actively removing the only comic part of it so that you are left with this serious, frightening, this spectre who is totally silent and really scary looking.
Yeah.
Who brings Scrooge to show him, the Cratchit family all crying and no Tiny Tim, and then his own grave, and there's just this dark music. The tones of the film change, like it goes into real dark blues, dark lighting. They do that right at the beginning as well, because that opening sequence is all lovely, bright, bright lighting and bright snowy stuff, and all the Muppets and the humans getting along together in the streets and stuff. And then when Gonzo's telling the story, and then he says, like, Scrooge is coming around that corner right now, and we're just like, where, there, when, now, and then it cuts to the opening beats of that song, but also a Dutch angle of Scrooge looking really sinister, with the lighting changes, the colours change, everything changes from the second he walks on screen. So it was really well done just in terms of cinematography. I just love the movie.
I've got nothing to follow up on that. I have no argument for or against what you're saying.
I just think it's really good. Apparently it's one of the very few Muppet movies where they list the starring roles and which characters the Muppets are playing in the opening credits. Because most of them, they don't do that.
Yeah.
This is the Michael Caine bit. I just thought it was really funny. So part of the reason why he did it is because he at the time, his daughter was 7 years old, and she had never seen him in a movie because he had never done a movie that a 7-year-old could watch.
Yeah.
So he wanted to be in a children's movie, and he was looking at the idea of being in a children's movie in general. But he also had missed out on getting a guest role in The Muppet Show because it was shot in the UK while he was living in the US at the time.
Yeah.
But a whole lot of his friends went on it. Sir Roger Moore, John Cleese, Peter Sellers, Sylvester Stallone, and they'd all told him that they had such a huge amount of fun appearing in the show and that it would give them extra kudos with children.
Yeah.
And then the film was greenlighted in 1991, right after Michael Caine had moved back to the UK. So when he heard it was being filmed in London, he insisted his agent badger the Jim Henson Company until they agreed to meet with him.
Fair.
And then when they finally called him up, he was cast like within weeks.
Wow.
Because he was like, no, I'm gonna be in this movie. And apparently he watches it every Christmas. All his grandchildren have seen it. He loves watching it. It's one of his favourite movies that he's been in to watch back.
Yeah.
Which I love to hear, because I mean a lot of actors say like they don't like to watch their own movies. So it's really nice, to have Sir Michael Caine being like, yeah, I love watching myself on the Muppet Christmas Carol. It's one of the best movies I ever did. And his daughter was able to watch it. His daughter was finally able to watch him in a movie. His grandchildren have all seen it. It's just really nice. It's also the first Muppet movie where Kermit the Frog wasn't the lead role. Box office wise, Scrooge.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, so Scrooge, the budget of Scrooge was 32 million and the box office was 60 million.
Yeah.
For Muppet Christmas Carol, budget was 12 million and the box office was 32.5 million.
Yeah.
But it suffered in box office because it came out at the same time as Home Alone 2, Lost in New York.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's hard to compete against.
So it was competing against Home Alone 2 and still made 32.5 million in the box office, which is pretty decent.
Yeah.
But, I imagine it would have made way more than that at the time if it had, didn't have that level of competitor against it. But I guess that's the risk releasing at Christmas anyway, because obviously a lot of people like to release. It was also obviously, which I think most people know, but then again I don't know what our audience base is like. It was the first Muppet movie after Jim Henson had died.
Yeah. And
after Richard Hunt had died, so it's dedicated to them at the beginning. But apparently Steve Whitmire took over the role of Kermit, said that he was really nervous about taking over the character, and the night before he recorded Kermit's songs for the movie, he had a dream that he met Jim Henson in a hotel lobby, and he told him about how unsure he was, and in the dream, Jim Henson reassured him that the feeling would pass, and when he woke up, he felt confident.
Oh.
So that's really sweet. He's real nervous about taking over, and then he just gets a dream about Jim Henson being like, no, that will pass.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this Christmas. We've had ups and downs, as you can tell from last week's episode, and then this week's episode. I think last week's episode I was filled with all sorts of hostile feelings.
This is the reason we're doing 2 Christmas episodes.
Yeah.
It's so that one of them I can torture Nick, and the other one we can both enjoy ourselves.
Yeah.
We can watch enjoyable movies.
Which one was which? I joke.
You like the Muppets, really.
Okay. So.
We'll just have to watch more Muppet movies together.
I like what the Henson company did with Farscape.
Yes, you do like Farscape.
Yes. And they are all Muppets. Rigel is a Muppet.
Mm-hmm.
Puppet is a Puppet. Pilot is a Muppet.
Puppet is a Muppet.
Yeah.
Pilot is a great Muppet.
Yeah.
But yes, this isn't necessarily about Farscape.
No.
Though I just love the Jim Henson Company in general.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find something that we can compare it to, like Labyrinth or something. Just do more Henson episodes.
I don't think there is anything.
No, probably not.
No.
Unless we did like Pan's Labyrinth, and no, that would not work.
Yeah, Labyrinth versus Pan's Labyrinth.
That would be an interesting combo of movies, but I don't think it would work for the show.
Yeah.
But if anyone has any suggestions of Jim Henson movies that we could compare to other properties,
Yeah, please let us know.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to watch more Henson movies.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at ittakes2_pod, and on Facebook at ittakes2pod, or visit our website at ittakes2.co.nz.
Which is a fantastic New Zealand-based website.
You've got a lovely New Zealand domain.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.